For iCloud. Okay, we're gonna go 3, 2, 1. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at in the U.S. and around the world. I'm Pete Caliendo. You're your host for Baseball Outside the Box. Thanks for joining us. Some of you I know are late mornings. You're up listening to the show. We are live on Facebook. Don't forget at Peter Caliendo, and the show will be up on YouTube at Peter Caliendo. So don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe to both of them, YouTube and also, of course, Facebook. Jump on there, join us. If you got questions on Facebook, ask us any questions, type them in the section, the comments section, and we will get to your questions. We got a great show for you today. I got to tell you, I had well, matter of fact, I'll show it to you. It's over. I got a double espresso for this show because I got a feeling my head's going to hurt because these coaches are smart, man. Nowadays, they are a lot smarter than when I grew up, and I'm going to learn a lot here. I can't look for, I'm looking forward to it. Let me introduce our guest. First of all, bachelor's and kinesiology, exercise science degree, master's degree in performance psychology. She is the mental performance coach, mental conditioning coordinator for the New York Yankees. Let me tell you, what a job, because, I know going back a long time, we, kind of sports psychology was a taboo, but now it's exploding. There's great things happening. Before we start, don't forget this show is dedicated to my mom who passed away November 5th. I talked to her on the last show. Times are tough, but we're going to talk to, learn about, how to deal with tough times, because there's tough times in the game of baseball also. So let's not waste any time. Let's introduce our guest. Lauren, I really appreciate you joining us on Baseball Outside the Box, man. This is great.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'll tell you what, you're very popular because everywhere I go, when I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and folks, we're going to put all the show on the show notes. The Instagram, Lauren Nicole Johnson. Twitter is _ Lauren Johnson _ We'll put all that on show notes so you know how to get hold of her. But all you got to do is Google her name. And it's going to come up right away with the New York Yankees, and you can check her out. She's got some great stuff, not only quotes, but some great advice on Twitter and Instagram. So let me do this because it's exciting. I want to talk about a couple things. What I think the appropriate thing is, I've been a big proponent of this for a lot of years. I know folks are going to say, sure you were, Pete. Well, go back and check some of the shows, because I'm a big believer what's happening in the game today. I know people sometimes can get a little bit upset about it, but I think it's positive for the game. And that is, one, there's a lot of young people getting involved at the higher levels. I think that's important. I think there's more women getting involved at the higher levels. I think that's important. I also believe women should be involved more at the youth levels where everything starts, Lauren. That's where the kids are going to stay in the game longer if they're taught well, if they're having fun, if people are positive. And I know you're a very positive person. So first of all, address your thoughts on, everything that's going on in the game of baseball with the differences in, I guess, with the hirings that are going on. Great hiring coming up this week. Kimming, general manager of the Marlins. I think that's a fantastic sign. So talk about what your thoughts on all that are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we live in such an incredible time where that's not a limiting factor to be a woman. It's actually celebrated, and I can say that I'm with one of the organizations that celebrates it the most. I myself and one other were one of the first women to be hired in player development, and we now have about 8 and counting. Wow. We just hired last year Rachel Balvadek as one of our hitting coaches, one of the first female hitting coach in MLB history. I mean, she is incredible. We are so lucky. We have our dietitians, we have analysts, we have all different types of females within our organization. So I just think it's no longer seen as a limiting factor, but it's organizations are looking at who is the best fit. And sometimes it is somebody like myself. Sometimes it is somebody like Kim. Sometimes it's somebody like Rachel. And so I think that that's the really important piece, is that it's really not about gender. It's about who is the best fit for this position. And I think that I feel very privileged to be a part of one of those females in MLB, to be one of them.
Well, you hit it right on a button. I love that. I agree with you. It's the best fit. It's when I look at people that, I have coaches that travel around the world. Sure, resumes are important, but I want to know the person. I want to know what the person's all about, how good they are, how they communicate, the things they do well. One thing I do love about all the people being involved is they challenge you. And I use the younger people, because younger people tend to be more open-minded and they start to challenge the status quo. And that's the reason I started Baseball Outside the Box, because I like to believe that you need to go outside the box when it comes to training. You need to question things more and ask why you're doing things that way. Is that the right direction we're heading in?
Heck yeah. I mean, how would you learn anything if you're not being challenged? I think that disagreement is one of the greatest gifts we can have. Why? Because there's some sort of gap in understanding. So when I have a disagreement with somebody, I celebrate it because there's a gap in understanding. Either I have something to learn or I can teach something. But either way, both parties win when you sit through that discomfort and you find a solution. And so I celebrate people that are willing to look at things differently, because I think that's how you sustain excellence long term. I don't think, you sustain excellence by doing the same damn thing. I just don't think that's possible. You look at companies like Polaroid, for instance. Okay, Polaroid, they invented instant photography. And yet then they wasted the next 10 years pretending like digital photography wasn't a thing.
Right.
Like, so now they're a niche market. But that's the problem, is it's not about, when you're climbing the mountain of a goal, the goal is not to get to the top and chill. The goal is never to finish the climb, but to master the one that you're on, all the while knowing that when you get to the top, it's going to reveal more. And that's, I think, where sustaining excellence and long-term development really benefits us, especially when you're challenging the status quo. I think that's where the most growth is found.
You know what? Keywords, man. And again, I hate to say it, but we have said it on the show 100 times. Long-term development. We're going to talk about the mental part of the game, because that has to be other than vision, in my opinion, those two seem to be the two top areas, especially in the game of baseball. But the reason I say we want to talk about long-term development is because I'm a big believer, and I go to the youth levels a lot, because I think that's where everything starts. And again, I mentioned it. That's where we keep the kids in the game. Our goal at the youth levels with coaches, parents that are coaching the game should be long-term, should be keeping them there as long as possible. How many more major leaguers would we have, or better major leaguers, more kids playing the game at a higher level, if we kept them in there longer? We use the excuse a lot of times, well, they get 12, and they want to play video games and do this and do that, and I have found that that's an excuse, because a lot of times if you ask kids why they drop out of baseball, because it's boring, because they don't like the coaches. It's not exciting anymore to them, and so that has a reflection on coaches. So my question is this, and I'm going to jump here a little bit. When you're dealing with young coaches that are dealing with young kids, how do they stay positive? What, just some advice to start there, and then we'll get into professionals. Some advice for our younger parents that are working with kids to keep kids in the game longer. What should they be focusing on?
Well, first of all, I always think that positivity is a choice. And I don't always believe that positivity is the answer. There's there's three domains that we can think in. There's a negative mindset, there's a neutral mindset, and then there's a positive mindset. And the way that Trevor Moawad describes neutral mindset is like when you're going backwards in a car. The only way, you can't just immediately go forwards. You have to first put it in neutral before you go forward. So sometimes neutral is also an option. But so I would say when it comes to positivity, that's always a choice. We have a choice to either look at things from a negative lens, and while the situation or current circumstance may not be great, we can still accept it as our reality. And so that's where I think a lot of our mental toughness lies, is accepting reality and choosing our response. Because we may not always be able to control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond, especially to the things that we can't control. So for me, when I think of positivity and all that, I just think it's a choice. And the more you make that choice, the more habitual it becomes. And then on the second side of that, when it comes to youth development, it should be about fun. Like, it should not be about every little bit of, did you do this right? It should not just be about results. And I know that that's a big problem in youth sports. I grew up, with a dad that was really hard on me. Yeah. And part of it was really good. So I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but it should be fun. If they're not enjoying it, they're going to burn out more than they would have if they were. So for me, it's so important that, number one, they're enjoying it, and we're teaching them what they can control. Success should be redefined in youth sports to be the things within their control. That is their attitude. That is their effort. That is, what plays they make on the field, not the result of it, but hey, did you make the right decision there? Hey, did you give all your effort? And hey, how was your attitude through it all? That is what they can control. When we can teach them that, when people are masters of what they can control, we can then build a process that they can then repeat. And what we know is that even at the professional level is it's about the process. When you execute the process, the results are a byproduct of that. And so we can teach it at the lower level by teaching them what they can control and making that the new definition of success. Instead of going, did you score today? How was your effort today? How would you score your effort today? How would you score your attitude today? And just kind of redefining that conversation.
In all that, the other part why kids drop out of baseball a lot, and then you addressed a great amount of it, and that is the negativity. And I know it's going to sound negative because it is a game of failure. Okay, you could spin that the other way. There's a lot of positives too, because we're always looking at a hitter striking out or a pitcher not doing well, but there's a lot more to the game than just that. So my question is, when a youngster is struggling and he strikes out 3 times, because we're going to have to use that. They love to hit. And I'm a parent, and and a coach parent, I've got to deal with that. How do I deal with that? Because if he continues on that path, it's no more fun. I'm going to find, soccer, which is more exciting, basketball, hockey, which there's more movement. So how do you deal with that situation at the young levels?
Teach them to choose their response. How you respond to failure has a lot to do with how it impacts you. And so for me, when I would choose our response, because the reality is you struck out 3 times. Okay, we're not going to lie and be like, oh my gosh, you did so good when you didn't. That's not helping the situation either. I actually want kids to fail. You know why? Because you're going to fail in life. Failing does not end at the youth level. It actually increases, and the stakes increase as we get older. So if we don't teach them how to manage and deal with failure at the young age, don't think that suddenly they're just going to improve as they advance levels. That's not how that works. So what I always say, parents ask me this all the time, is like, what is your number one piece of advice? Let your kid fail. And instead of picking them up and eliminating failure, eliminating pain, you're actually doing them a disservice, because as an adult, they're going to have to deal with the same things. So help them understand and develop it at the lower levels by teaching them how to respond to failure. What are the benefits of failure? What can we learn from failure? Because a lot of people say you either win or you learn. Well, I think we can actually take that a step further. You learn or you learn. You learn from your wins, but you also learn from your failures. If we don't look at our wins and learn from those, then we're leaving a lot of good information on the table. We're leaving information on the table that says, this is how I succeed. These are the things that work for me. So we should, number one, also be evaluating how you win. What are the things that worked? What did you do? But then also evaluating, why did we fail? Like, what did you do that maybe you could have done better? Or maybe you did everything right and you just didn't get the response that you wanted. Either way, we have to understand how to respond to failure, how to respond to winning, not just by looking at the results, but looking at your process that led you to that result, and then choosing your response as a result of that.
What's interesting about all that? Michael Jordan said the reason he, became so successful was all the failures he had when he was a young kid. And it was interesting because as a coach, I've always tried to tell parents, listen, we can't worry about the umpires. You can't control them. Matter of fact, I want bad calls, especially at the young levels, right? You just said it. You want to see them deal with pressure, with situations that's uncontrollable. How do you deal with those? And one thing you said that really struck me, you're hearing this more and more, and I'm glad about this. And I hope that but I don't know if we're reaching the young levels, because we seem to have the better coaches, like yourself, at the higher professional levels, but we don't have them at the younger levels. And one thing you said, it sounds like a lot, is you ask a lot of questions to a young player or older player.
Yes, because that's the true. If we look at how our brains evaluate and learn new information, it's not by being told something, it's about finding the answer. And so Tony Robbins says this, that if you want better answers, ask better questions. And so we would be doing a disservice by not asking questions. As a coach, you're going to receive feedback on whether or not they fully understand the situation that they're in anyway, based on their responses. Okay, hey, so talk to me really quick. How'd you feel out there? what happened? Talk me through that. What happened? Why do you think that you missed that? Why do you think that you struck out? Start asking better questions to see if they can understand. And if they can't, that's when we help them understand. But as you continue to ask those questions and not immediately give the answer, you're giving them that ability, you're giving them the ability to learn. And we take that away when we immediately give an answer and we immediately come into their rescue. I think that's a disservice to their development.
And that's not just the failures that they have, but it's also when we're talking about techniques of training. And I say that because, I'm a lot older than you are, and I go back when I started in 75, I believe, I don't even remember. And, whatever we were told, we did as a player or even as a coach. When my assistant coach told me we were going to do it this way. And if coaches don't change that mentality, you can see that the coaches that don't change that type of mentality don't make it anymore in today's game.
Mm-hmm. Well, you limit your growth. The moment that you believe you know everything is the moment you set yourself back. You're limiting your ability to grow. There's no end in sight to growing and learning. And I'll tell you right now, I don't want to arrive safely at my death. Like I want to learn up until that last minute. I want to be taking risks. I want to be trying new things up until that last minute. And I think that that's when you have that mentality, that's where that long-term duration comes from. And there was this great interview that Tiger Woods did many years ago. And they asked him, like, what do you think long-term success means? And he's like, or where that comes from. And he said, it's about duration. Anyone can win for a day. Anyone can win for a week. Anyone could be good for a year, but can you be good for a decade? Can you be good for a decade plus? And that takes being able to evolve with the changes that happen around us. Because what we know is that the one constant in life is that it's always changing. And you get to choose to evolve as a result of it. I mean, it's one of the reasons why some animals become extinct. Many times, not all the time, but many times it's not because they're not strong enough. It's because they didn't adapt quickly with their environment. And so if you want to last, if you want to survive and you don't want to become extinct, it's who can continuously evolve and reinvent what they're currently doing and to keep up with the changing environment.
Speaking about that, we've, it's been, I think 10 months. We've been at home mostly, once in a while we get a chance to go to the gym or do something, ride a bike. And I want to get into that a little bit because I think a lot of people can learn from, I know it's 10 months into it, but if they haven't learned by now that certain things are important when times are tough, like I said, my mom passed away, my dad passed away in January. We go through the virus, no work for 10 months. I could sit there and there's days where, yeah, I want to give up. I say, I give up. I'm just going to, relax. I'm not going to do anything. But then you kick yourself in the butt and you say, look, that's not the way you deal with these type of situations. So in scenarios like this, where people are struggling, I guess, because it has to do with baseball also, because, baseball is a game that teaches life skills. What's your message to the people out there in dealing with the virus? What should they be doing? And if they're struggling with work or whatever it may be, how to stay positive, because that's tough.
Oh, it's really tough. And I think it just boils back down to this idea of monitoring and getting really clear on what you can control. And so one of the things that, if anybody's listening can do at home is you can take a piece of paper, draw a big circle in the middle of it. And in the middle of the circle, write all the things that you can control. And then on the outside of the circle, write all the things that you can't control. Now, when you do this, this serves as a really good visual reminder because right now, a lot of people's minds, our minds are built to find and seek the negative. There's this kind of negativity bias that is built into our brains. And it used to be a survival mechanism, but now it doesn't really serve us very well in a lot of ways. And so I would say that we have to retrain our brain to look for the things that we can control and to work within that world because you can spend all of your time, like, sure, you can focus on things you can't control and you can spend all your time there. That's you can totally do that. You have that ability to choose. But know that if you do, that you're not going to make one bit of progress while doing that. Why? Because things outside of our control are just that, out of our control. So worrying is not going to change them. Being upset about them is not going to change them. And you can exist in what should happen or what didn't happen or what is happening, but it's not going to change your state. What will begin to change your state is by giving yourself back a little bit of control by focusing on it. So that is you. You are the only thing that you can focus. You can focus on the perspective that you choose to take. Does this suck? Sure, it does. And I'm not asking you to change the fact that it sucks, but you get to choose how you view the situation, and don't underestimate your ability to improve despite your circumstances. Don't underestimate your ability to remain grateful when others are complaining, to find different ways and adjust your goals even when your circumstances don't allow you. Look, we may not have the opportunities we want, but you still have the opportunity to get better in any area that we've been talking about, especially in the areas that you can control. Because when we give effort to things we can't control, our effort's wasted. You might as well just like throw it in the trash. But when we give effort to things that we can control, our effort is effective. Sometimes that's as little as letting yourself know, hey, it's okay to be upset. Just giving yourself some compassion. Sometimes it's compassion. Sometimes it's, you know what, like it's a little tough love. It's like, hey, I can still work out even though I can't go to the gym. Let's do some like body weight workouts. Whatever that is, the first thing to go when we're feeling overwhelmed is our sense of control. So that's one way we can really give that ourselves a little bit of control back.
I'm assuming you're dealing with your players. I mean, you got players, your coaches on Zoom a lot or virtually. What are some of the things you're hearing from some of the players and coaches? So maybe some of the things they're struggling with that can help, and how you're helping them in those areas. I know this is part of what you just talked about, but maybe there's some new things that players have brought up to you and then how you deal with that with them.
Yeah, a big one right now is focus. And actually, I had a player come to me and he said, "Lauren, how do I stay focused? Or how do I eliminate distraction?" I think that's how he asked it. And I told him, I was like, "Well, first you're asking the wrong question. It's impossible to live a life without distraction. So let's take off the table this idea that we're going to eliminate it, okay? Because distractions are going to happen. So where I care about working in reality. That's just like how I work. And so I work in the reality that you're going to get distracted. So I think the more important question would be, how do we become refocused when we become distracted? Because I think the best focusers are not guys and girls that don't get distracted. They're people that know how to return their attention when they become distracted. So for me, I like to use the analogy of a ship in a harbor. Okay, a ship in a harbor without an anchor is subject to moving when the wind blows and is at risk for being taken out to sea. But a ship with an anchor, while it may move, it's not going to go very far. That's what I like to use with our attention, is finding an anchor. And there's 3 ways that we can anchor our attention to the present moment, which is number 1, use your breathing. You can only breathe in the present moment. And so as you take a really intentional breath, after you take, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 breaths, now you've just anchored yourself back in the moment that you're in, and then you can redirect your focus where you need. Second one is tell yourself one thing you hear, one thing you see, and one thing you feel. You can answer those 3 questions, you've anchored yourself back in the moment. And the last one is answering the question, what's important now? If you can answer that, you've also just anchored your attention back where it matters. So by using an anchor, we can help refocus when our mind begins to drift, so that we're like the boat, we're drifting maybe a little bit because that's life, it's normal, it's going to happen, but we're in control of it and we're not drifting very far.
Now, I know that you've worked with athletes in other sports, coaches, and all different levels. So you got a great amount of experience in this. Take us through with our audience, because our audience is in the U.S., but also all over the world. Take us through what your routine is as a coordinator, what your job is, whether it be in spring training or whether it be during the season, because I'm sure it changes and it evolves all the time.
Yeah, so I work with a team of 6, and we have an incredible team, and we all work throughout our system and on with all of our players. And so what my role is on the team is I'm, like I said, we have 5 mental coaches and 1 guy that is incredible with video that creates all of our educational content for us. And so out of the mental coaches, what we do is we kind of divide and conquer. And we're working with all different guys. And the reason being is that some of us may overlap on teams, because I'm smart enough to know that I'm not for everybody, and neither is, we're all, our personalities jive with some and better than others. And so the cool thing is that they can work with any of us at any given time. There's no you have to work with this person. And so what we're doing is we're doing group sessions, we're doing individual sessions, we're working with our staff, we're working with, all of our players, all of the support around them. And we're really just teaching mental toughness and mental skills and how to build them, And so they can be their best regardless of circumstance, which is how the Yankees define mental toughness. And we also believe that you don't have to be sick to get better. And so the way that we work is we are not like an ambulance where somebody is having a terrible game and we're like, oh no, mental coach, like on the field, that's not how we operate. Actually, we would all just not be very opposed to that. Why? Well, because mental toughness isn't a light switch. It won't just turn on when you need it. It has to be practiced daily. And so that's where we come in. And that's where we're teaching them daily practice, and that you're never too good to improve. So even if you're at the top of your game, we're working with guys that are having the best season of their life, the worst season of their life, and everything in between. And we truly, that's the way we teach, because that's what we truly believe.
And that's the reason I asked that question is because, when it comes to the mental part of the game, people think it's, a player fails, he comes in, you tell him a few things and everything just corrects itself immediately. And they feel good about themselves. Now, we know the game of baseball, you got to train daily. So it's a daily routine. So you're saying that you guys have a system where you train them daily how to deal with a failure, whether it be breathing or whether it be whatever system it is. And then there's also times they can come to you in different situations, but you got to train certain things all the time, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you have to, and maybe the cadence isn't always daily, because we have too many people in our system to be able to be with them on a daily basis. But that's why we also train people that are around them, like our staff members, to be able to teach the same principles and support the message that we're sending. And then the cool thing is that, with this virtual world, we're still able to connect with them no matter where they are in the world.
Basically, we're also saying that the majority of your time is dealing with pressure. A guy's under pressure, a gal's under pressure, and having to deal with that pressure of whether it's that one pitch at a time, or whether it's the at bat, or whether it's the error they made. And I know you talked about, and I love this because I think it's so important. You're seeing a shift a little bit because you're seeing more coaches starting to train athletes in real game situations. What I mean by that, you know what I mean, but an example would be what I said earlier about the umpires. If we don't know how to deal with a bad call, then how are you going to learn? And if you don't know how to deal with that at 10 years old or 11 and 12, that's the problem I had when I was younger. I didn't have that training. And in other sports, I was a head case where, I exploded at referees because I didn't know how to deal with that situation. So it's a daily routine, I guess, is where I'm getting at.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. If you've never learned, or you've never been able to put into play how you're going to manage pressure, don't expect to manage it when it comes. If you've never put into play how to respond to failure, don't expect to respond well when it comes. Like I said before, it's not a light switch. It has to be trained. And so as staff, as coaches, you cannot expect your players to do well under pressure if you've never put them under pressure. You can't expect them to handle failure and adversity well if you've never put them in situations to handle adversity. That's I think the biggest piece, and I think people are starting to realize this and implement it, especially at the younger levels, which is put them in those situations to deal with it. Put them in those situations, because you can't just talk about it. Okay, well, if you're under pressure, it's a good thing. It's a privilege. Okay, those are fine words, and yes, we can all agree with them. However, what does that mean in practice? What does that mean in performance? That means controlling your breathing when your heart rate spikes. That means changing the interpretation of nerves into a threat, into a challenge. And so there's all different ways that we can utilize pressure and view it in different ways that helps us instead of hurts us. But if you don't practice it, don't expect to use it when the time comes.
Now, the other area I would assume is understanding how much pressure to put on somebody and when to put it on. Because maybe they're not prepared for that level of pressure yet. I don't even know where you start with that.
Well, the way I kind of look at it, and yes, you're right, it's not always easy to identify, but I look back to some research done by Harvard psychologist Yerkes and Dodson, and what they talk about is this optimal zone of anxiety, which is anxiety that just reaches slightly outside of your comfort zone. So it means and they also call it the Goldilocks rule. So it means you're putting yourself outside your comfort zone, not so much that you know you're just going to set yourself up for, or set your player up for failure. Not so much that it's just so easy. There's like, it's just not hard for you. You know this player can handle the situation, but just right, like just in the middle of that, where they're reaching slightly outside of their comfort zone, but they're not in it and they're not totally outside of it. When we look at it that way and we look at players, like their just right zone is going to be different based on the player.
Hmm.
And so I would say that you need to really know your player and what they can handle, and so that you can put them in that optimal zone of anxiety. Now, the point of putting them in that optimal zone is not for them to succeed. A lot of people go, well, I'm going to put him in there and just because I think he's going to succeed in here. Well, yes and no. The failure is not bad either. I would say without the, I wouldn't focus so much on the result as I was focused on, is this an optimal zone for them? In your opinion. And like I said, it's not exact, but you can use your best judgment if you know the player, and putting them in that situation really gives them the opportunity to practice what you preach, which is how to handle pressure, how to respond to adversity, how to respond to failure. Because when they experience those things, that's the best way to implement them. And as you do, you build that skill.
You know, this happens in the game a lot at the younger levels. Love to get your advice because we also have parents that listen to this, and coaches that are working with younger players also. Parents, they mean well. I mean, we all want what's good for our kids, right? You want to see them succeed all the time. So what happens a lot of times, they'll start off at 8 years old. Unfortunately, we got travel teams that play way too many games, but that's another topic. But at the same time, they stay at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, pretty much with the same team. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, that's great because then they build, camaraderie, they understand each other, they play better, they play cohesively and all that. But I also look at it as, don't we need some adversity? Don't we need to change teams, learn from different coaches, learn how to deal with different people? We're almost placing them in a bubble, in my opinion. And again, it's just my opinion. That's why I want to get your opinion on this. There's no perfect system, but what's your recommendation there if with players that stay with that team too long?
I mean, I think it's like anything. I think you have to gauge your ability to grow within it. Everybody has a ceiling in certain places, right? That's why we advance levels. That's why our players advance levels. And I would say that if you're feeling like you've hit this plateau and there's, it's limiting, if it's limiting you, then yeah, I'd say definitely it's probably time to look for another team. But if it's not limiting, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, unless you're not gaining something that you want from it. Now, I also believe that we always have control over our growth to an extent. And then you could say, I know for me, I would advance a team if I felt like I could make the next level. And even if I couldn't, I would still try out. And that's just my opinion because I wanted to be the best. I wanted to play for the best teams. And so I would say that it has more to do with development and ultimately that player's goal. If that player's goal is just to have fun and enjoy, and they don't really feel like they're not enjoying it because they're competitive or they want to be the best. They're just enjoying it because of the social aspect. Then I don't see a need for that. But if their goal, if they really want to advance levels and they feel limited at the level that they're at, then yeah, I'd say maybe it's time to look for another team.
Now, I know you deal also with a lot of players from Latin America. I believe you have some other coaches that deal with in that area. I've dealt with it a lot traveling the world. And, what I love about Latin players is that they deal with a lot of adversity. They're talking about rough lives. They come up from a tough life. Plus, they play on tough fields. They don't have gloves. They play with different size baseballs. You never know what they're playing. And they just love the game. They love to play with it. But at the same time, sometimes they have a tough time, as I do as an Italian. We have a hard time dealing with the emotional aspect of the game sometimes. I guess when they come, I know Dominican players, Latin players come up to the system. Are they being trained in Latin America first in the mental part of the game and then brought into the US? What's the system look like there?
Yeah, well, first I want to say that, like, emotions of the game are it's not just our Latin American guys, it's everybody. And then I'd also say that yes, a lot of our guys from Latin America, they are training first in the Dominican Republic, and we have incredible mental coaches that my coworkers that work with them in the Dominican Republic, and sometimes I get to guest in some of those sessions.
Nice.
They come up here to the US, and man, talk about a transition going from this is my home, this is where I'm from, a whole different country, a whole different culture, to then having to adjust to the American culture. It's not easy. I mean, I think that they are some of the most mentally tough people I've ever met.
Yep.
And because of their ability to deal with adversity so early, it's pretty impressive to see how that translates to baseball as they continue up. But yeah, we do have somebody down there to introduce different topics, so that when they come to the U.S., they pretty much they know that like they're primed to be able to continue the work that they've been doing down there.
And I know you have your systems, but I think what's interesting is, can we take some of the environments that are created in Latin America or other countries and utilize them in the US? Because, we seem to be a little bit too comfortable. We've got the nice fields, the nice gloves, the $400 bats. It's all about equipment, fields, and making everybody look good and feel good many times. When at the same time, it really needs to be about, dealing like you're saying. And I looked at one of your quotes that said, what environment are you setting up to handle the pressure? So can you talk about some of those environments, maybe specifically for baseball?
Yeah. So there's a couple environments that we can use. Like for instance, for pitchers, a lot of things that they experience under pressure is their heart rate gets jacked up. And you can actually do this for pitchers or hitters, but have them, run a quick sprint in between like ABs or in between pitches, where they have to control their breathing in between. And what it does is it simulates pressure by raising the heart rate, getting our blood moving, and then having to control it without pressure actually being present. So we can simulate the physical feeling, and then we can implement that mental skill that helps them really slow down, control. Because if you want to control the moment, start by controlling your breathing. Your breathing is like a domino. If you hit that over, a lot of things fall into place. And so it kind of becomes a catalyst for control in that moment. So for our guys, that's one of the things that we can do. Another thing too is like adding audio, adding pressure with like a crowd. There's all different kinds of things. Adding consequences. Anytime you can make something a competition, I mean, our guys like light up. It could be the most like in our minds, like you'd be like, oh my God, this is so lame. And you use the word, it's a competition. Our guys are like, let's go. Like we had some virtual competitions this off season, and our guys were just jacked up about it. So I would just say, if you can make anything competitive in any way, what you're doing is you're adding some level of consequence and reward. And our brain is really motivated by consequences and rewards. So that's one way that you can do that.
Well, I love that because, going to spring training in the old days, they definitely did not have that. There wasn't a lot of competition. I think people, they don't understand that. They think that only kids love competition. And I'm going to shout out to my good friend, Kenny McCudden. I'm wearing his hat, Columbus Blue Jackets. He's one of the coaches in the NHL. And, he trained the Blackhawks during the break when they had the strike. He was not a Blackhawks coach at the time, but he trained the team because the other coaches couldn't do that. And make a long story short, when he got done with their 6 weeks training, I mean, we're talking about Hall of Fame players on the team. One of them came up to him and said, that is some of the funnest practice that I have ever been involved in, simply because he made everything competitive, but also realistic when it came to real games, what happens in real games and competition. So where I'm getting at, I guess, is you said it. You said virtual competition. So I'm going to ask you about it. I got to ask you, what does that look like? Because, maybe we can, learn and use that now because people are still indoors. What's virtual competition?
Well, I mean, we do stuff that's like, trivia and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun because what we do is we test them on things we've taught them. And so it's like, number one, you're reinforcing things that you're teaching them. But number two, you're also giving them an opportunity to compete against the people they're against. So it's like a twofold. If you can gamify anything that you're teaching, you are just going to increase their desire to pay attention. Not saying they didn't want to before, but you're going to increase their desire to pay attention to the details. In other words, so for instance, like if I would do a session, our guys would take insane notes, like way more than they would before.
Because they knew they were going to be tested.
They knew that one question might be on the competition and they wanted to be prepared for it. So guys would like rewatch our session because I'd have like a video version of it. They can go rewatch it later if they couldn't attend the live session. They would like rewatch it to make sure they took all the notes and they didn't miss a dang thing for competition day. So I would say that would be a really fun way to do it, is by gamifying something that you're doing. Right, you can do trivia, you can do a bunch of stuff, but something that could be easy to implement and fun at the same time.
So Lauren, to coaches up there, we got about 10 more minutes left. I really appreciate your time on this. To coaches out there that are coming up through systems, and I'm going to use my experience and just tell you what I thought when I went from coaching amateur baseball, which was like our national team at USA Baseball, and all of a sudden I had to go into independent ball where it was professional athletes. It was AAA, AA players, some major league players. um, I was scared because I'm thinking, I haven't dealt with these players before. And I don't care if you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're, whatever area you're getting into, advice, because, you've got to be able to sell yourself in some ways once you get to every level you're coaching in. What's your advice for, I guess, coaches out there that think they can't coach at a higher level because they just don't have that ability to communicate, or the old phrase, oh, if you didn't play in the big leagues, you can't coach in the big leagues, which I hate that phrase because I could like just mention my friend Kenny McCudden. He never played any hockey in college or high school, and he's one of the best NHL coaches. I mean, when a professional team goes to him and asks him to train him, that tells you how good he is. So advice to coaches out there, because I think there's a lot of them thinking, man, I can do it, but I'm not sure.
Well, first thing is I agree with you with that statement. I don't agree with that at all. We have coaches that haven't played in the major league in our system, and they're some of the best coaches I've ever worked with. Like, they're incredible at their job. The Yankees wouldn't have hired them otherwise. So number one, that. Number two, no one can do what you do like you do. Like, people aren't hiring you just because like you reach some level. They're hiring you for you and what you do well. And so what I always say with people is that you don't have to be something that you're not when you when you get to the next level. The only thing to pay attention to is that every new level will require a new level of you. That if you're here and you go to the next level, you're going to have to step up in some way. You're going to have to step up in some degree. A lot of times what I'm seeing, especially with my athletes, is that your level of preparation changes. Your level of attention to detail changes. And so that right there, and your level of routines and all of that has to or changes to some degree. And so I would say that that's 100% false, and that's a limiting belief, because what I would say is like, who makes that decision to say that you're not good enough for that? The same way when people told me, what, you think dudes at the major league level or dudes at, in professional baseball are actually going to listen to you?
Yeah.
And like, I had that stuff said to me. I had people say, well, Lauren, you don't have a PhD. What makes you think you can teach this? And I'm like, well, you don't need a PhD to teach this. I'm not trying to teach the things that somebody with a PhD would teach. I'm teaching mental skills. And so there's a lot of people that are going to have a lot of negative things to say. And in my mind, I don't take advice. I don't listen to somebody's opinion who I wouldn't take advice from. I think that, there's a lot of cheap seats, but there's only a couple spots on the field. And so if somebody's not in it with me, if somebody's not like in the trenches with me, I really don't care about your opinion. I care about the opinion of people that are in it with me, that are putting in the work, that are the blood, the sweat, and the tears. You think somebody's going to go up and tell, like, we have so many females in our organization, which I'm so thankful and glad to work with. You think any one of them were told like, oh, you can't do it because you're female? Hell yeah, they were. And guess what? The only difference, they didn't listen. And so you're going to always have critics, and the best way to silence them is to not listen, keep your head down, and do the work.
Absolutely. Love it. How about Lauren Johnson? What does she do? One, to get better, because you always want to try to get better in your skills. But at the same time, and the standard answer, obviously, a lot of times is, of course, learn from others, read books, get better, just constantly be involved and learn from everything you're seeing. But are there times, I guess my question is, because I've had this in my coaching experience, are there times where Lauren Johnson comes up with her ideas because of experience, because of trial and error? Talk about that, and maybe some things maybe that you should learn on your own.
Oh, well, there's a lot. There's a lot. And the reason why is because, like you said, when you challenge the status quo, when you challenge those normal ideas, that's where my ideas come from. Because just because something's been said a million times, I like to find what's the angle we haven't looked at. What is the thing that we're not looking at? And that's like when everyone's like, oh, how to bounce back from failure. Well, I want to know, how do we bounce back from success? Because that can be an equal dampening of performance. How, like, oh, well, don't fake it till you make it. Or people are like, fake it till you make it. Well, I don't believe that. I think don't fake it till you make it. Learn to behave it regardless of how you feel. And so I like to look at things with a different angle, and actually by reading and by like reading other genres, not even just sports psychology, I get these ideas by just reading. I'm like, have we thought about it in this way? And so I'm constantly trying to find another angle that still, makes sense to some degree, but empowers us more. Because to be honest with you, fake it till you make it doesn't work for me. I can't get behind faking it. Like that just is not reality. And I told you, I work a lot in reality. So, okay, well, here's a thought. And this is one that like I totally subscribe to, is a lot of people believe that the way that our, thoughts work, it goes, our thoughts affect our feelings, which affect our physiology, which then affects our performance, which is totally true. That's one way that can work. But I also think it's true that you can feel one way, you can think one way, and you can act totally independent of that. And so that's why I don't subscribe just to like, oh, well, this is just how it is. Well, that may be one way to do it, but have we thought about it from this perspective? Have we thought about it from this way? And so I get that actually from reading, from writing, and from listening to a lot of other people, and not being afraid to ask questions, because there's a lot of things I don't understand. There's a lot of things that I have to learn. And I think that actually the more you learn, the more it opens up doors for realizing you just don't know a lot. So I know that there's a lot for me to learn, and I think that's how I do it best.
You know what? I got to tell you, I've been in the game 37 years. I'm with you because I'm still trying to figure things out. And I'm going, what was I doing, 5 years ago? Why was I doing it that way? But again, it's a learning process. But I love what you said, bounce back from success, because this also relates to real young kids. Because again, we put them in positions to succeed a lot, and they're real good. You see them, they're 15 years old. They're doing really well. They've never failed much. And then all of a sudden, I've seen this a lot. They get to a certain level, everybody's their level, they start to fail and they can't deal with it.
Yep. And that's the thing, is that success can be equally detrimental as failure. The reason is because we feel like we've done it, we've made it, let's chill, like I'm good. But the problem with that is that if, again, the moment you believe that you figured it out is the moment you set yourself back, including when you've succeeded. Like that's why, like you look at perennial successes. You look at people like LeBron, you look at people like, Kobe, you look at people like, Tiger Woods and Jeter, and, I can go down a long list, Serena Williams, and you look at these people and how have they been able to sustain success? Well, I'll tell you right now, they didn't win their first major or their first tournament and go, yep, I've made it. They go, hell yeah, let me celebrate. Now let's get back to work. That's what they do. And so I think that that's exactly like when it comes to responding to success, it's knowing, okay, I'm going to celebrate and I'm going to enjoy and I'm going to be really proud of myself. But then I evaluate why I succeeded and how can I continue to incorporate that into what I'm going to do next. And that's how we bounce back from success.
If you're sitting in my shoes and asking the questions, what would you ask Lauren Johnson that I did not ask, that is very important, that our coaches, players, parents, and I know it's a broad question, but something that you would have asked yourself in this interview or this discussion? I use the wrong word, interview. I love discussions better. What would that be? What question? Is there something we missed? What do you think? Lauren, you there?
Oh, you're talking to me. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to the audience.
Yeah, I tend to confuse people sometimes.
Peter, I'm so sorry. I totally thought you were talking to the audience. I'm like, great, let's wait for questions.
No,
I see you're saying in your position.
Yeah, if you were sitting in my chair, right, and you're asking Lauren Johnson, certain questions, what would you ask her that I didn't ask? Because I'm trying to get to something that you want to say to people out there that we didn't get a chance to talk about.
I think, I had this question asked to me the other day and I responded differently than I'm about to respond because it kind of tripped me up when he asked it. And I thought I knew my answer. And then later on, I was like, that's not actually my answer. He said, how would you define success? And I think originally I was talking about the process. Success is the things that you choose to do. And I guess to some degree it is about a kind of a spinoff to what I'm going to say. But I think success is waking up happy. Like, I think success is waking up and going like, you know what? I am so grateful for this life that I live. And one of the biggest gifts I think that we've been given is this power of choice. And I don't care who you've been up until this point. The future has never been lived before. 5 minutes from now has never been experienced before. And you can choose to show up however you choose. You can choose to be somebody totally different than you've been before. You can choose to live a different life. You can choose to pursue something that maybe you've been putting on the back burner. You can choose to change your perspective. You can choose to change your mindset. And I guess I think that I'm so grateful for the life that we live. And I think that it would just be such a shame to waste it on focusing on the things that we can't control, especially those things that really bring us down and that drag us and that limit us. And so not to say I don't fall into those too. I'm human and I do fall into those, but I always wake up feeling pretty optimistic because I know that I have a choice. And I know that every second of every day, I have a choice of who I want to show up as, who I want to be, how I want to treat others, and how I'm going to ultimately live my life.
Love it. And lastly, we'll close it off with this. I think this part would be good. Lauren Johnson, when you were younger, was this something you aspired to? I mean, think about it. You're working for the New York Yankees. I mean, so many people would love, and not just the Yankees, but in our industry, to be at the major league level and be able to have the ability to work at that level is just a great accomplishment. But was that something, a goal, or how did you set your goals? I guess, were they just a daily goal, a monthly goal, a yearly goal, different levels? Did you ever dream of getting to that level, or did it just happen? Get a little background on that, and we'll close it off with that.
Yeah. And like I said, I work with a team. I don't exclusively work with the major league team. My director does that. But I can say that I did not dream of this, when I was a little girl. I actually dreamed my first goal was to be a professional soccer player. In my third game into my senior year, that dream was kind of taken out from under me. Now, granted, at the time, I had kind of, my goal had kind of shifted. I did want to play overseas professionally, but mainly for the experience. And third game in, I received my 5th concussion and was told I could never play again.
Wow.
And it was pretty heartbreaking, but I can tell you that it's what led me to where I am right now. It caused me to take an elective course in sports psychology. And that's what made me fall in love with it. I didn't even know it existed, which is why I got my degree in kinesiology, because I thought I wanted to work in physical therapy. And then I minored in psychology, and I really loved it. There was something that connected me so much to it. And I guess my biggest realization was, I look back on my playing career, and I think the reason why I was so drawn to sports psychology when I learned about it was because I was the player that needed it the most.
Yeah, I could relate to that.
Yeah, I was the player that I got in my own way. I limited myself. And I think that when I learned these principles, I thought, man, I know I can't play anymore, but imagine how many people you could help to cope with these things that are inherent, to cope with these things that are going to constantly exist, and help them manage it better, so that when they end their career, they don't go, man, I got in my way a lot. But they go, hey, I have the tools to be able to cope and overcome those things. Because I think at the end of the day, no matter where you end up, whether our players end up in the major leagues, which is what we hope, or they end up, getting released early and going on to live their lives, we hope that they leave better than they showed up, and they become good men, good husbands, good brothers. And that's what really matters to us. And that's what matters to me. And I think that's what really, sports is what got me into sports psychology, but the people is what's kept me in it.
And I got to ask you, sorry, I guess I lied. It wasn't the final question. The baseball, how did the baseball part begin? Where did that start? Did you go that avenue, or did somebody pursue you?
No, so actually I went that avenue. After I graduated with my master's degree, I had 2 job offers on the line. And I ended up turning one down and taking the other. But the one thing about this other job that I chose is that it was going to be 6 months till I got placed. And so I was like, that's fine, 6 months until I can get into the real world. I'm good with it. So 6 months goes by, and I never heard anything. So I'm like, So I reach out and I'm like, hey, just checking in to see when I'll receive my placement. And that's when I got this email that changed everything. And he said, I'm sorry, the job's no longer available. And my mouth just dropped. I was like, wait, I thought I already got it. What do you mean it's no longer available? So now here I am, 6 months out of my master's degree. I started with 2 job offers. Now I have none. It's 6 months. The other role already filled the position. So I called everybody that I knew, and a lot of people had moved on to baseball at the time. So I knew a lot of people in baseball, and there just was nothing available at the time. Nothing at all. At the time, they weren't even looking at grad students to be bringing into systems. So I decided to get a job at Starbucks because I needed to make money. And I'm working the drive-through, and this one day is exactly what pushed me in the direction I'm in now. I'm working in the drive-thru and this guy pulls up and his drink's taking a little bit long. And so he asked me, we just spark up a conversation. I'm trying to entertain the customer. And he goes, so Lauren, what'd you get your degree in? Or he asked me, I'm sorry, are you going to school? I'm like, yeah, actually I just finished school. He goes, great. What'd you get your degree in? I said, oh, performance psychology. And he just starts laughing at me, like full on belly laughing. And I was so confused that finally I asked him, I'm like, what's so funny? And he's like, oh, you got one of those degrees you'll never use.
Wow. Wow.
I was floored. I made somebody else hand him his drink because I couldn't even look at him.
Wow.
I was so upset. But I think the thing that upset me more was the fact that I kept ruminating about it all day. And I kept getting mad. And I thought to myself, like, Lauren, you don't even know this guy. He doesn't even know you. What does his opinion matter? Why are you so upset?
Right.
And that's when I had this like light bulb moment. And I realized I wasn't mad because he was rude, even though he was. I was mad because he was right. Here I was, hit with some adversity. And the very thing I would tell somebody to do, I wasn't doing myself. So how was I going to be a good mental coach if I couldn't even take my own advice? How was I going to instruct professional athletes if I couldn't do the things myself? And so that was the very day that I Googled how to start your own company. And I started my own consulting company. And all the while really networking as well as I could in baseball, because I knew, one, I grew up in a baseball family, so I always loved the sport, but I knew it was the sport that was hiring. And so I grinded and I did a lot of cold calls, a lot of no's, a lot of ignores, but every once in a while I'd get a yes. And after a year's time of grinding and working in my own consulting business, I got a call from the Yankees, and I got the opportunity with the Yankees, and that's when I got the call that I got the job.
Wow. I'll tell you what, folks, I know you're thinking, well, Pete, why didn't you ask that question at the start of the interview? But I think it's better, believe it or not, right now at the end, because what a closing. I mean, that's a great way to close the show. Talk about adversity, talk about, when doors close, what else opens? Talk about, sometimes it's tough to hear the truth. I mean, all that stuff. What a learning experience for a lot of people that are getting into some of these jobs that it could be tough. How about the phone call where they tell you, oh, sorry, we don't have the job anymore. That'd be my question. Wow, you don't have a job anymore. What happened to it? Lauren, that was fantastic. I love it. I want to thank you for your time. This has been great. Hope to get you on again. Continue success with what you're doing. God bless you. I think you're going to continue to do a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is so much fun.
All right, Lauren Johnson, New York Yankees. Listen, folks, I want to thank Lauren. I want to thank our producer with the Lineup Media Group, Brian Kroc. Thank everybody in the U.S., around the world. Rest in peace, Mom. Always thinking about you. This show is dedicated to my mom. Special thank you to, obviously, everybody on Facebook. We will put everything on the show notes. Don't forget, stay safe, be healthy. We'll be back on the field soon. God bless everybody, and we'll see you on the next show.